This is SportsJam. I'm Doug Doyle. The high-flying, jaw-dropping, insane trampoline-based dunking sport, you remember it, SlamBall, is making its U.S. return in Las Vegas. After making a monster run in the early 2000s, the sport is making a comeback at Cox Pavilion on July 21st and on ESPN.
Plays it to himself and slams it home. Spectacular move by Cheesemeyer.
Great move, so tough to do. Just the timing back off the tramp. Now look at this. Realizes just banks it right.
Here comes White again. Anthony White. And contact.
Hooker. Hooker literally trying to hook White in. It didn't work. Watch Hooker. Here comes White. Down, gets twisted around, unable to stop the drive.
8 teams will have a chance to be crowned kings of SlamBall with a final championship in August. And joining us to talk about SlamBall is one of the early investors who helped get this sport off the ground way back when. He also happens to be an acclaimed filmmaker and TV producer, an extraordinary content creator, Mike Tollin. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug. Thanks for having me. I love your description of SlamBall. It makes me excited. Can't wait to get started again.
People are excited about seeing SlamBall return. And what a run you have been having, Mike Tollin. You served as executive producer of the Emmy Award-winning The Last Dance, the 10-part documentary series on Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls dynasty. But you also were the executive producer for the 2022 TV miniseries, The Captain, of course, about the Yankees' legendary shortstop, Derek Jeter. So you're coming off some of the most talked about films and documentaries that we've seen in sports in a long time. So Mason Gordon comes up with the idea of the sport of SlamBall in 1999 while working for your production company. And that happens to be Tollin Robbins Productions, Mike Tollin and Brian Robbins starting that company. And you invested in it and you helped build the early prototype court. But thank goodness for the napkin.
Mason was hired, some say, because he added some value to our backyard basketball game. He, of course, disputes that. But he was, a jack of all trades, a production assistant, sometimes had to answer the door, sometimes had to get lunch. Early days for young Mason Gordon. He was a great basketball player, and he was a great spirit. And little did I know that he was a bit of a rocket scientist and a bit of a mad genius. And he presented me with this notion for this newfangled, crazy, high-flying sport, which you've described so well. And I remember looking at him in some measure of awe, astonishment, and befuddlement, and patted him on the shoulder dismissively and said, Mace, I love your enthusiasm, love the idea. I'm going to go make a movie in North Carolina. I'll see you in 3 months, okay? And so off I went. It was Summer Catch. It was the first movie I got to direct about the Cape Cod Baseball League, which is really a special little gem that happens every summer in the Cape. And I came back, whatever it was, 3 or 4 months later, and he was still there with that pesky napkin. One thing about Mason, persistence, perseverance, he was all in, and he had done a little demo. He had taken this napkin and put it up on its feet, and he rented a warehouse space, and he created some way of jerry-rigging a piece of wood and inserting a trampoline into it, just one, and one rickety 10-foot rim, and had some game athletic sorts just come up and slam and jam and fly through the air. And when you say an early investor, Doug, use that word loosely because I'm not sure how to describe the investment. It was really more believing in him, supporting him, and just saying, let's take a shot. And as it's been proven now, more than 2 decades later, media really kind of drives sports properties. That's what fuels it. That's what gives it the exposure. That's what makes it, in modern day sense, go viral, and be adopted and be watched. And then sponsorships and all the revenue generation comes from that. And so since that was, that's my lane, is content creation, and never really been a live sports guy, more a guy who makes documentaries and scripted TV series and films, I said, let's see if we can turn this into a TV property. And so I called a guy named Albie Hecht, who had been an early supporter of Tollin Robbins. Albie was running Nickelodeon back in the days when we kind of took over the primetime block, which was called SNIC, Saturday Night Nickelodeon, right? We had the sketch comedy show, All That, which was basically Saturday Night Live for kids. We had Keenan and Kel. Look what's happened to Keaton Thompson. Just one of the great things is when you see a kid come through and just not only talented, but such a hard worker and such a good soul. And here we are a quarter of a century later, and he's just everywhere, killing it. Amanda Bynes, Nick Cannon, even Shaquille O'Neal's Sports Theater was part of that SNIC block. Anyway, Albie had moved on and started a transition of the Nashville network, which had become the national network and now was turning into Spike TV. And he said, we need a signature sport for our new network. Let's give this thing a shot. He took a flyer with us the same way I was taking a flyer with Mace. And off we went. We had 2 great years on Spike TV. But when people say, well, why now and what's different? The dream was to create a sport. I've been lucky enough to be a part of teams that have created lots of movies, lots of TV series, lots of documentaries. But, in my heart, I grew up as a sports guy in Philly, suffering with my mostly losing teams. And the idea of actually creating an original, authentic, legitimate sport was exciting. And this wasn't that. This was it was played competitively, but it was presented as a packaged, sort of event. And I dreamed something different. So we kind of let the contract run out. We made a deal with some folks in China, created SlamBall China. We made a deal with IMG. We put it on its feet at Universal. We had a lot of iterations through the years, but it took, everything runs its course and everything, finds its time. And so during the pandemic, a couple things happened. The China thing was sort of killed because, well, the pandemic started there and nobody was coming to games and sitting elbow to elbow and watching live sports. So SlamBall China was all of a sudden dormant. But at the same time where people were, sort of stuck in and, social media was booming and that's the way people were communicating. SlamBall was going viral on all kinds of different social media platforms without us lifting a finger.
You can see Denise explodes down the court. Oh! Rush down the gate and burns down the house.
Oh, they nicknamed him the sheriff because he brings you to justice just like that.
And Mason and I, we're still dreaming the dream. Life is really long. And you talked about being on a run. For me, it's sometimes it's a crawl and sometimes it's a vigorous walk. But you just got to stay in the race, right? And so we started seeing these numbers. We started seeing several million views for a 7-second SlamBall clip that we didn't even know how it got there. We started taking note, and all of a sudden there's hashtag bring back SlamBall, and there's a clamor that we'd have to be stupid to ignore. And so started putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We brought in a guy named Tom Penn, who had successfully run the LAFC soccer team. He was part of an expansion team in MLS. They won the championship in their 5th year. He had sort of completed his run there. We felt like he was the nuts and bolt operational presence that we needed because Mason had come work with me as we started Mandalay Sports Media and had become a terrific documentary producer. So we're now creating content together, but sort of not in the live sports game. So Tom was a great piece of the puzzle. And then it's about, raising the dough and just going out to the marketplace and seeing if the sophisticated investment community supports our notion that the world is finally ready to bring back SlamBall. And we oversubscribed. And then we got great response from the media outlets. And we're, of course, thrilled to end up with a big commitment with ESPN. And here we are, just days away, Doug. It's all happening.
And, when you think about it, you really touched upon an important point because you've had great success during the pandemic because of people really just launching onto documentaries, right? And you've done some wonderful docs that just about everybody has watched. And now with SlamBall, because it's such a great social media event, you're taking advantage of what is out there now and how people like to consume sports. They like it to be very active. And we're also in the world of still where media games and games in general, right? Video games are so popular. And, oh, can I be involved? Can I immerse myself into a video game? Well, that's what these players are really doing. They're putting themselves onto a court with these trampolines, and they become video game players, actors in these sports, but it's for real and it's for championships. So I commend you on that. And even the coaches that you have involved, one of the former coaches is Kevin Carter, who's obviously the life story is the basis for the 2005 basketball film, Coach Carter, that you were involved in. I understand you have some funny stories connected to Coach Carter.
Well, Ken Carter is in fact back, I'm happy to say, Doug. It's incredible. The community of SlamBall has somehow stayed together, even in this diaspora, if you will. And so several of the coaches are back. A lot of the players who are now have gone from their 20s to their 40s are now back as either assistant coaches or administrators. There's a guy named Stan Fletcher who we called Shakes because he just had the moves. And we always said, Mason and I said, this guy was born on a planet where SlamBall was the national pastime. And he's brought it to Earth because there's no way, this is a guy who clearly grew up playing SlamBall. Well, it didn't exist on Earth. So wherever he came from, and now he's teaching these moves to a whole new generation of players.
I've heard Mason describe him as the Dr. J of SlamBall.
For sure, at least that. Ken Carter, as you said, was portrayed by Sam Jackson in the movie Coach Carter. And this was a guy who had been making $13,000 a year as a volunteer part-time coach of a East Bay high school, Richmond, California. And he did the unthinkable, which was to take a team that was heading in a trajectory that looked like they could be state champions. And he had the audacity to actually look at their academic performance because he'd signed contracts with all of them as portrayed in the movie. And he was not willing to look past their failing grades and their lack of attendance. And so one Monday morning, there was a padlock on the gym door with a note saying, "Meet me in the library." And he basically postponed the season until further notice, which is to say, until you get your damn grades up to, I think it was 2.5 average or something. And so he was a hero and portrayed in that movie.
Good afternoon, young man.
Are you some preacher, man? Because God ain't gonna do you no good in this neighborhood.
Leave the gym.
I ain't scared of nobody, because I'll lay you out.
I don't think so.
Teachers ain't supposed to touch students.
I'm not a teacher. I'm the new basketball coach.
He went off and started a speaking tour. And I'll never forget, this is maybe the story you're referencing, but it's my favorite Coach Carter story. He's out there and he's got his little sizzle reel and he's got his little marketing deck and he's Coach Carter as portrayed by Sam Jackson in the movie. And so I'm thinking about a year and a half later, I get a call from Coach Carter. He's in Texas now. He's building a new nonprofit school, charter school, and great things are happening. And he said, "Mr. Mike, I want you to be the first to know Coach Carter's a millionaire now." It was kind of like Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies. Anyway, Coach Carter's back. SlamBall is, I think it's fair to say, going to be a bigger and better and a game that's transformed into something that is a true, legitimate, authentic sport. ESPN gives us that credibility. They're broadcasting all the games, ESPN 1, ESPN 2, ESPN Plus, 30 plus hours. If you're in Vegas between July 17th and August 15th, tickets will be available. They're short format games now, Doug. So we're going to have these 2-hour programs, whether you're watching it on TV or coming in person. You buy a ticket or you tune in for a 2-hour block, which will feature 3 games. So team 1 plays team 2, team 3 plays team 4, and then the 2 winners play. So it's kind of like a mini tournament every night. And we'll keep the standings and the stats. We're going for total geekery. Sports fans have proven there is no end to the data analysis, right? And we're participating it full on. We're working on having betting available. It's, there's a bit of a registration, and there's all kinds of, federal regulations that we got to adhere to that may or may not be ready for the start of the season. But it's, it's really now about creating our own stars. People say, well, who's going to be in it? Is it like the big three where it's ex-NBA players? No, these are guys you probably haven't heard of, although they've all played at a very high level. We're, as Mason likes to say, we're creating our own Conor McGregors, right? There's a new sport. Some people have said SlamBall to basketball is like UFC was to boxing when it started out, right? So we're creating our own celebrities. There's going to be hopefully highlights on Sports Center, and there's going to be, back and forth on the internet about who's the best player and who's the MVP and who's the favorite to win the championship. And there's going to be swag. Michael Rubin, who runs Fanatics, is one of our investors. So stay tuned for sweatshirts and caps and T-shirts and all the good stuff. So we're excited.
And the league is comprised of 8 teams with 7-man rosters. And when it comes to the players, you're talking some of really talented football and basketball players, because it is a physical sport. For those who haven't watched it, you're going to take a hit as you go up for the dunk. So tell us what kind of athlete you were looking for, and maybe some of the people you're excited about seeing.
There's a skill set that we had to define and cultivate, and to Mason's credit, he did it himself. I mean, he was the guy who was on one of the teams in the Origin. And when the players came out there, they were, mostly D1 basketball kids, some football kids, some gymnasts, some hockey players, guys who thought they were the biggest, toughest kid on the block. But they looked at that top tramp. There's 4 trampolines embedded into each side of the court in an area roughly comprising the key area, only in a rectangular space. So 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. And the top tramp is farther away from the basket than Michael Jordan taking off at the foul line and dunking the ball. So they're looking at that with trepidation. And Mason finally said one day in the early going, damn it. He took the ball and he went up to midcourt, and he got a head of steam, and he jumped off that top tramp and he dunked the ball, and he fell through the springs and he banged up his legs and he had to go to the hospital, but everybody gave a standing ovation. It's like SlamBall was born. So, that opened the floodgates, and now we have a level of athlete. There's a guy named Rob Wilson, who is our sort of general manager, player personnel guy, and he's an agent. He used to be a player, and he has access all over the world. So he's bringing people from many different countries. I think ferocity, Doug, might be one of the prime characteristics. You have to be willing to mix it up, because, as you said, there's a lot of hitting. I mean, there are very specific rules, and there is a lot of kinds of contact that is forbidden. You can't strike above the neck. You can't hit somebody from the back or in a blind side. But you can get checked in the open field. It's more akin to a check in hockey or a downfield block in football. The great thing, though, is if you violate the rules and you sort of go outside those lines, instead of kind of the dullest part of a basketball game is the whistle blows and everybody stops and you line up and somebody strolls to the foul line, and it's sort of a lull. Well, when there's a foul in SlamBall, it's the opposite. It's the height of the excitement, because we have what we call face-offs. So the guy who was fouled gets the ball at midcourt. The guy who was the perpetrator ends up on the baseline in the corner. The ref blows the whistle, and they both run toward the center of the court, and they each jump off opposite trampolines, and they meet square away 15 feet or so above the floor. And one guy tries to, however possible, get that ball in the basket, and the other guy can do pretty much anything, short of gouging out his eyes to keep the ball from going in the basket. So that's the face-off.
I could never be a part of this, because I remember my days in gym class. I was terrified of the trampoline because I just didn't want to get up that high. Now there's the gunner who does all the dunking. There's the handler, like a point guard type, and there's the stopper. If Mike Tollin was allowed to play this sport, which role would you play?
Easy. I'll be the handler. I was always the point guard. I was a pass first ball handler, scrappy guy, mixing it up, playing good defense, leading the fast break. I have, at all of 5'8", I have dunked the ball on a 10-foot rim coming off a trampoline. And I know why people want to play slam ball. It is exhilarating. And in China, where a lot of the players were relatively diminutive, it was empowering to see these guys get up. Remember, you heard it here. The guy who I have my eye on, let's say season 3 of SlamBall 2.0, when Russell Westbrook has played out his $43 million a year contract, he's the guy we got our sights set. Because Russ is like, you just look at that expression, right? Who's more ferocious on the court than Russ? So he's going to come back for the Clippers. He's got a 2-year deal. When that's done, he'll be our first draft choice, circa 2025.
You mentioned something real briefly that, when you played, and you did play basketball and baseball, your dad was also quite an athlete. Both of you were inducted into the Philadelphia Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in 2009. So that had to be a special moment for you. Thanks. You're laughing, but that had to be a great moment.
Well, it was great. My dad had passed away, so he was inducted posthumously with me, but it was a chance for me to honor him. I was allowed in through the media wing. He was inducted as an athlete. He was in the Haverford College Hall of Fame. He was a two-handed set shooter in the vein of Larry Costello, if any of your listeners go back that far. He averaged, I love this, he said, he averaged 20 points a game, and he said, yeah, and that was before the three-point shot. Imagine what I would have averaged if I was getting 3 for those shots from the top of the key. A pesky little guy about my size, and it's great. I'm a Philly guy. I wear that on my sleeve. I've raised my kids in LA, but they know to root for the Eagles, Sixers, and Phillies. I was at all those World Series games last year against the Astros, and I was at all those Sixers playoff games this spring against the Celtics. And you lose more times than you win, but that's what makes it taste so great when we finally do get there.
Yeah, and what a run for the Eagles as well, too. So you happen to have your sports teams are intact. I'm from the Pittsburgh area, Mike. We're on the downward trend. So I grew up in the 70s, so I was spoiled. Okay, with the Steelers and Pirates, and then eventually in the early 90s with the Penguins and whatnot. So, but you actually did some play-by-play announcing for Stanford when you were there, right?
That was the most fun I ever got to have, but I'm not sure that I quite had the pipes like you do, Doug. I don't have that radio voice, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. My best buddies in the world, there are 4 of us. We affectionately call ourselves the 4 Donkeys, and we ran the KZSU Sports Network, did play-by-play for football, basketball, and baseball. We just had a Father's Day reunion of 40 plus years of friendship, and those were good times. Stanford wasn't setting the world on fire, but yeah, those were fun days. And then I went back to Philadelphia, and my first job was with Greatest Sports Legends. And 3 days after my commencement at Stanford, I was researching the legend of Ted Williams in the Philadelphia Library. So here I am, still doing a lot of the same stuff.
You've done some incredible work, Mike. And I have to say that my lady, Rose, one of her favorite shows of all time was Arliss. She loves to, and still, looks for Arliss shows. But you've done so many things like Varsity Blues and radio, Hank Aaron Chasing the Dream, and films like Big Fat Liar and One Tree Hill, Smallville TV series, all kinds of things. Is there anything that if you say, boy, I'd like to go back and regenerate this series, what would it be?
Well, it's funny about One Tree Hill, because there was a season when we had a SlamBall arc, and actually Joe Manganiello, who an actor has done exceedingly well since then, was in the show and has reached out to us and said, I got to be a part of SlamBall. I got to be a part of SlamBall. So he will be in one way or another, broadcaster or influencer or something. That was a lot of fun. We are talking about some revivals. There's a Coach Carter series that was in the works when the strike happened, which we hope to resume. have a special place in my heart for radio. The movie with Cuba Gooding, Deborah Winger, and Ed Harris. It's just a lot of my heart was in that movie. I was proud to tell that story, just about lives on the margin and people with, certain obstacles to overcome.
All right, bring it in.
Glad you came by. Got some hamburgers coming. Get your buggy. Come on in. Well, you found some music you like. Good.
Hey, look who's here. You tell you his name yet?
Well, he doesn't talk too much. But he's sure taking a liking to that radio of yours.
Radio. Radio, huh? It's just sitting there. You can have it as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, you hear that? Radio. Coach Honeycutt says you can take that home with you if you like.
Sometimes you're on a set where everybody's in sync. It's like a team. You put a film crew together, and sometimes you're all pulling in the same direction, and you're all supporting each other. And that just was a set with a lot of love and a lot of heart, and stayed close to a lot of those folks. And you mentioned chasing the dream. Well, Hank Aaron became a kind of like an Uncle Hank to me, and we started a foundation as a result of the film, giving away millions of dollars to inner city kids, disadvantaged kids, help them chase their own dreams in whatever field it might be. And we've actually got a script going again that sort of stalled because of the strike. But the hope is that we can get to the hurry up offense once the strike is done and get a film out next year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Henry's 715th home run that broke Babe Ruth's record. So that's that as opposed to the documentary Chasing the Dream, this is a scripted drama that focuses on that year, which should have been the most triumphant time of his life, getting to break that hallowed record. But in fact, he was living in isolation and had to be guarded by an Atlanta policeman 24 hours a day because of the death threats and all kinds of hate mail. And so it's a really, really trying time and a tough piece of American history that we're hoping to bring back sometime next year.
Major League Baseball, you did the captain, Derek Jeter's story, but you were involved with Major League Baseball for quite a while, and I understand your son is involved in minor league baseball. So where did that passion begin?
I have a granddad named Phil Tollin, who was the sweetest man I was ever privileged to know and love. And he used to sit me on his knee, sometimes not literally, but figuratively as I got a little older, and tell me stories about watching Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and the old Yankees from the 30s and spring training in Florida. And just baseball was passed down in the tradition of what was the national pastime. And I think a lot of people now would probably think it's been superseded by football and or basketball. But I've always been a baseball guy. My dad passed it down. I have a son who played a lot of baseball until he had an arm injury. I have a thing about having a catch. There is only one answer when your son says, "Dad, you want to have a catch?" There is no matter how tired, no matter how busy, no matter how distracted, no matter how you're feeling, like, grab the gloves. And so we always dreamed of being a part of a team, and we invested in the Pioneer League, which is an independent league in the Rocky Mountains predominantly. And so we have two teams that we have an interest in northern Colorado, Fort Collins area, about an hour from Denver, and then Grand Junction in the other part of the state. And my son is working with the Northern Colorado Owls. That's Owls with a Z. And he's part of the operations team there and integrated deeply into this team. And it's it's a great path he's on. He just, every day he gets to go out to a baseball field and make a living with that. So I hope he continues on that path. It's a real joy to share that with him.
Before we get your final thoughts on SlamBall, the fact that you did radio play-by-play, is that one of the reasons why all those radios are behind you?
Coincidence, Doug. I used to go to a flea market with my wife, and she would be shopping for who knows what bric-a-brac, and I was looking for something to do or something to keep me amused and interested, and I found a scrap heap of old radios. This is going back 30 some years, and it became a thing for me, and I just fell in love with the design, the Art Deco, the Bakelite. I grew up listening to baseball games on a transistor radio as the Phillies blew a 6.5 game lead with 12 to play in 1964. My first year as a fan, Richie Allen's first year in the big leagues, my soon-to-be hero and friend, and hopefully subject of another film we're working on. And so I just took to it, and they were all over the house, scattered around. And actually, when I went to make the movie Radio, my wife, Robbie, took it upon herself to build this shelf and put these radios in some kind of order, which I probably never would have done. They just would have been, scattered around. So these all work, and they all have a, kind of a special place in my heart. There's several others that are like vying for inclusion. This is sort of the A rotation, then there's a B team lying around, and I substitute in and out. But it makes me happy to come into this room and see these old guys. It makes me feel grounded.
Gets me excited because I'd like to check out all of those radios at some point. Yeah, but you mentioned the answer when your dad says, "Do you want to play catch?" It's funny because the great sports writer Jerry Eisenberg here on SportsJam talked about back in the 1930s when he was growing up in Newark, his dad bought him his first glove, a moment that he will always cherish and never forget. So with SlamBall, the showcase on ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Plus throughout the 23-24 seasons, and the playoffs and the title game August 17th to the 19th, how long will it be before I've got another hit on my hands?
Oh, it's open to interpretation, Doug, right? There'll be a lot of people. There'll be a lot of, crossfire on social media and on, the major platforms. We're going to keep going, man. We have a head of steam. We have so much momentum. We have so much support. We believe in this thing. So, as we said, look, we're in our third decade now, right? And we feel so blessed that the world has sort of come around and the universe feels like it's ready for SlamBall. So ESPN made a 2-year commitment. So, we're sort of committed through the summer of 24. And hopefully you and I will meet again and we'll take stock and see how we're doing.
That would be fantastic. So if you like high-flying action, you like contact, you like dunks, you like basketball, you like football, you're going to love SlamBall 2.0, and it's coming to ESPN. Mike Tollin, very much involved in it. Thanks so much for joining us on SportsJam, and thanks for bringing us all these wonderful programs through the years. You have touched so many people's lives. We appreciate it, and continued success.
Thanks, Doug. Great talking to you.
SportsJam is a WBGO News production. You can hear all the past shows by going to wbgo.org/sportsjam or wbgo.org/studios. You can also find SportsJam with Doug Doyle on the NPR list of podcasts or wherever you hear podcasts. Special thanks going out to Joe Favorito for hooking us up with Mike Tollin. Until our next SportsJam session, I'll see you at the game.